Veteran Claims Ambush 28C, as in Charlie. This is an actual Board of Veteran Appeals opinion. In order to understand how strange this opinion is, I urge you go back to episode lecture 28A and 28B. I do these for your cell phone. So you can look at these. You can take note of documents, reports, analysis that I show you, find them on the web, and read them in full for yourself, including this opinion. So I have marked this one up. When you read an opinion from the Board of Veteran Appeals, mark them up. Now, you mark them up in order that you may understand what you are reading. They write them marked up. Opinions by lawyers are parsed, word by word by word. So here we go. Case number, date. This is the date. We're talking about a widow who has sought survivor benefits called DIC. Her husband, her late husband, was a World War II vet who suffered grievous wounds. Purple Heart, the Italian campaigns, which were brutal. And so when he left the service, he was diagnosed with a mental condition. Now listen to what I'm going to tell you. In 28A and 28B, I showed you research on something called PTSD. I showed you a journal put out by the Veterans Administration about this. The diagnosis of PTSD did not exist in 1945. It did not exist. That is a later sub-definition of a mental condition that used to be known as combat fatigue, shell shock, things like that. PTSD as a specific diagnosis did not exist in 1945. This opinion is from 2020. And what it's about, service connection for the veteran's cause of death, he died, it sounds like, from a heart attack, is denied. This is how these opinions are written. Parse decisions, word by word. So, he died in October 2008. When you die, there is a death certificate. Normally, it will list a perfunctory cause of death because you present to the physician who will sign it, dead. So, you could have trauma from an accident. You could have what looks like a heart attack. If you are, let's say, 80 years old and they diagnose a heart attack, there does not need to be an autopsy. Let me repeat. Forget what you've seen on television. There does not need to be an autopsy. It is an overt cause of death. For instance, old age, natural causes. When you get young people who fall over dead, as happens, there may be a need for an autopsy, but most times with elderly people, there is not any need for an autopsy. So, whether it's a coroner or a physician or an ER physician's assistant filling out a death certificate They do not have to go into great detail if the cause is apparent. So here, obviously, to the person filling it out, the death certificate was apparent, signed, basically a heart attack. Okay. The immediate cause of death being congestive heart failure and coronary artery disease. That is the immediate cause of death. Atrial fibrillation, diabetes mellitus, serious diabetes, chronic kidney disease, cerebral vascular accident, colon cancer, gout, gastroesophageal reflux disease, and hypothyroidism were significant conditions contributing to death but not resulting in the underlying cause of death. Okay. What are we looking at? He had all of these things. This is pretty serious. His medical condition had deteriorated. The VA had found him 80%, and then 90 disabled, based on his wartime injuries and things they caused. Look at all the things this particular deceased veteran had. Okay. I want to add one more thing. This whole idea of burn pits and environmental poisoning, exposure to all kinds of wild stuff, did not exist in 1945. Sometimes I have to drink something because my throat is coming apart. Okay. Now, the fatal disease processes, plural. Does that mean all of these? Were not manifest during service or within 1 year of separation. That's a matter of record. Oh, yeah? The fatal disease processes were unrelated to service. The fatal disease processes, plural, were unrelated, causation or aggravation. It doesn't have to be a direct cause. All it has to be is aggravating, contributing to service-connected disease or injury. This is extremely important. A disability incurred in or aggravated by service, or aggravated by, incurred in or aggravated by service, did not cause, contribute substantially, or materially to death. Now watch how this works. There are going to be 5 remands. 5 remands to Victor Bravo Alpha. 5. You think they're all tired of this case? 5. How on earth could that happen? Well, we're going to see. So this is the way they'll be written. We'll come to conclusions of law. So the veteran served from 42 to November 1945. We don't know if he was drafted or if he enlisted or whatever. We don't know. But he was in it. He died in 2008. We have a widow, surviving spouse. Here we go. The matter comes before the Board of Veteran Appeals, BVA, from a March 2009 rating decision by the Department of Veteran Affairs, the RO in San Diego, California. This matter has been remanded by the Board in March 2016, August 2017, April 2018, July 2019, and March 2020 for additional development. It has been returned to the Board for appellate consideration. What does that say? It says VBA screwed up 4 times, and this is the 5th remand. Now, if you have a trial on the merits of something, you get 1 shot. Oh, there may be an appeal and it's sent back, but you don't get 4 and then 5 shots. But VBA does. You don't. You can't go back with the same nonsense 4 or 5 times, but VBA can and will. What are we looking at? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It has been returned to the board for appellate consideration. Denied. The appellant, the widow, asserts that the veteran's service-connected psychiatric disorder, he had a service-connected psychiatric disorder, aggravated by psychiatric disorder. Wait till you see what he had. Here it comes. Well, the psychiatric disorder aggravated his hypertension and heart disease and thereby caused or substantially contributed to his death. They said this in 2009. This is 2020. 2009, 2020. It is argued generally that the veteran's death was caused by or materially contributed to by a service-connected disability. It is argued that the veteran was or materially contributed to or by a service-connected disability. Let me repeat. It is argued that the veteran was a combat veteran. Let's look at this. Materially contributed to by a service-connected disability. It is argued that the veteran was a combat veteran and suffered from combat wounds, plural, and PTSD. Read this part again. It is argued that. No. These are facts. See October 2020 appellate brief. The representative argues that stress affects heart disease and that it can negatively affect heart disease. This is the position of the widow. 28A, 28B lectures showed you what the research says, showed you the VA's own research. Now, sometimes you can get a body of independent research that is dispositive, meaning that when you see it, it inherently takes the position and pushes everything else aside. It basically disproves anything else. Imagine you are looking through the literature. You've seen 28A, 28B. You are looking through the literature. Here's what I want you to find. I want you to find something that says PTSD cannot cause heart conditions or hypertension. Cannot. I've shown you research, which I gathered in about half an hour, that showed clearly, even the VA's own research, that PTSD can cause heart problems. And this has been known easily for over 14, 15, 20 years. Let's take a break. I'm back. So, now we know. All we have to show is that it contributed to. And materials were provided by, I think they were represented by the American Legion, to the effect that if one has PTSD, there is no question that it can cause heart troubles. Multiple board remands have been undertaken to obtain adequate medical opinion. Now, this is a term of art defined in case law. A medical opinion must be adequate. I showed you what a DBQ is. This is where the BVA judge, well, it's different actually than what a BVA judge will do, but it's where a VBA, in this case, already did it. They sent something to a VA doctor that was a DBQ and then asked for the separate medical examination. Now, I've shown you what a DBQ looks like, and I've shown you what a medical opinion looks like. Always get these. They'll try to hide them, and they'll put you off. They'll tell you, oh, you have to file a FOIA, F-O-I-A, Freedom of Information Act, or a Privacy Act, and we'll get around to it. You know, we're very backed up. And then they'll lie to you about that, which I'll show you again in a future one. Okay, so the multiple board remands were looking for adequate medical opinion evidence to address the critical issues in this claim by means of medical opinion. So how many times does VBA get to go? Why stop at 5? Why not 10? Why not 20? You see? You see how this is working? You don't get that. You don't get that. But they do. Do you think they're incompetent? You think VBA is incompetent, or they're just lazy, or they don't care? I've shown you the IG reports. It's about move, 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 case, case, case to get the bonus, to provide statistics for Congress to say, oh, we're doing our job, give us more money. Okay. Now, so the most recent opinion, you see, these are do-overs. The most recent opinion rendered in August 2019, this is November of 2020, is based on a review of the entire record and includes consideration of all the prior opinions as well as medical literature. Why are they bothering with the prior opinions if they weren't adequate? Why are they bothering with the prior opinions if they were not adequate? You know why. And as well as medical literature admitted by appellants. So the new opinion is just looking at everything, so they say. A record of the VA physician's credentials who authored the report is of record. It's not in this opinion. It's not in this opinion. So, under this statute, when a veteran dies from a service-related disability, VA will pay dependency and indemnity compensation, DIC, to the veteran's surviving spouse. So we go through the same dance here. That is, that you have a disability that is incurred in or aggravated by service, principal, or contributory to the cause of death. All it has to be is contributory. And we have seen combat veteran. This gets really wild in a second. Okay, veterans are entitled to compensation from the VA if they develop a disability resulting from personal injury suffered or disease contracted in line of duty, or for aggravating of a pre-existing injury suffered or disease contracted in line of duty, blah, blah, blah. They have to put that in there. In general, and it tells you how you go about showing this, okay, you need a nexus that cites the case. Holton versus Shinseki. Okay, let me move this. 557 F3rd 1362. You can look that case up. Okay, it's important. Okay, Holton versus Shinseki. This is your homework. 557. F3rd, 1362. This is the Federal Circuit. This isn't just the Court of Appeals of Veterans Claims. This is the Federal Circuit. This is big stuff. Watch what goes on now. Okay, so we see how you can go about doing this, how you establish things. So when this guy, this decedent, got out of the army or the whatever he was in, what was he? Completely healthy? Okay. Now that tells you about certain presumptions. Okay. This is all boilerplate. This has to be basically in there in this kind of case. Here's one of the greatest fictions you'll come across. A claimant is entitled to the benefit of the doubt when there is an approximate balance. When there is an approximate balance of positive and negative evidence. This is the law. The preponderance of evidence must be against the claim, for benefits to be denied. Okay? Alemany v. Brown, 9 Vet App, 518. This is an incredible fiction. Oh, it's the law. They had to send it back 5 times to make it so they could say, this isn't 50-50. See, 50-50 you win. If you have evidence on the one side and evidence on the other side, and you weigh them up and they seem to be equivalent, the vet wins. That's what the law says. They sent it back 5 times. Well, what was the evidence after the first? What was the evidence after the second? After the third? It wasn't sufficient for them to deny the claim. So they sent it back 5 times. And they finally got an opinion they liked. They finally got an opinion they liked. Let's talk about the background of this particular veteran. At the time of his death, the veteran was service-connected for burn scars on various areas of his body. An adjustment disorder with anxiety and depression. Oh, is that all? Is that all? Wait till you hear what really happened. In addition, he was granted compensation for residuals of a GSW and neuropathy. Oh, is that all? A little gunshot wound? Let's back up here. Burn scars on various areas of his body, diagnosed with a mental disorder, a gunshot wound, and neuropathy. So when he got out, here, it is not in dispute that congestive heart failure and all these different diseases didn't manifest until many years following service. And it took them 5 opinions to finally be able to say it's not even 50-50, because in the first 4, maybe it was. You see? Maybe it was. So they went back for 5. Why not 6? Why not 10? How many do-overs do they get? Okay. So he just had, a little bit of a burn, and so he was shot, and so he had a mental condition. So, I mean, come on, neuropathy. His combined VA disability rating was 80% from March 31 of 1960. And 90% from August 14, 2006. TDIU was in effect from August 14, 2006. Time for a break. I'm back. We're going to get some more detail about this particular World War II veterans' injuries. Now you know the numbers. He was 80%, then he was 90%, and he was TDIU. It means he couldn't work anymore because of his service-related injuries. Listen to what I said. TDIU is about employment. Stephen Hawking, great professor, I've talked about this before, in a wheelchair, Cambridge, Lucasian Chair of Mathematics, wrote several books about astrophysics and so forth. Brilliant man. In a wheelchair. Was making tons of money. How? Well, books, lectures, television appearances, etc. How did he do that? Well, he had 4 paid research assistants. He had television producers, television creators coming after him all the time to do more and more and more. He was a genius in his field, and he had a lot of help. Therefore, anybody in a wheelchair could work, so they should not get TDIU. How do you like that? No. I mean, that's the absurd example, but TDIU is about he can't be employed. Why can't he be employed? Because of his service-connected disabilities. He couldn't be employed. So he had TDIU. He wasn't 100% rated, but they gave TDIU. Do you see the contradiction? Why could he not work? Because of his service-related injuries, ratings. They were pretty serious. They were very serious. They were so serious he couldn't work. And he died from congestive heart failure and hypertension. And look at all these other things he had. He doesn't get TDIU for all those other things. Only for the service-related stuff. He's 90%. He can't work because of 90%. When you can't work, that means you can't make, in modern terms, about $15,000 of income per year. He couldn't work to earn that much or that little. That's how serious his injuries were, according to the VA. This is the impeachment of an opinion within itself. All right. His DD 214 reflects that he was a cook, whose awards and decorations include the Purple Heart. Well, he had a GSW, gunshot wound. Okay. And EAME, European, African, Middle Eastern Campaign Theater Service Ribbon with 3 bronze battle stars. His battles and campaigns include Naples Foggia, Rome Arno, and southern France. His service personnel records reflect that he was accidentally burned by a can of flaming gasoline in November 1944 while leaving the kitchen where he was stationed. His November 1945 service separation examination was overwhelmingly normal. Of course it was normal. Millions of people were getting out of the service, all busted up, and they were normal. How did he get service connection for anything if he was normal? His health was assessed as satisfactory, Cardiovascular, nervous, and endocrine systems were normal. He did receive a certificate of disability for discharge for other results of non-battle traumatisms, deformities, described as multiple cicatricial scars of the right arm, forearm, hand, right chest, anterior and posterior aspects, flank, right thighs and legs, bilateral, secondary to second and third degree burns occurred in the November 1944 incident. Do you understand what this is? His body went on fire, gasoline fire. You can't put that out with water. You cannot put out gasoline with water. You have to smother it. If you throw water on it, you may cause it to spread. So let's add up where he's burned. Pretty much the whole right side of his body. And there are second and third degree burns. It's a miracle he survived the third degree burns. Scars all up and down the right side of his body. Now, for any of you who have had third degree burns, you may be aware that they are always in pain, forever. Scars, every time you look at them, will remind you of the incident. His body was on fire, plus he has a gunshot wound. Do you think he has PTSD? Now, there are people with gunshot wounds who do not have PTSD. Ask people who have been on fire with these kinds of scars. Ask them how often they relive it, or don't. Don't ask them. Because they do, and you know it. And everybody knows it. His body was on fire. He's scarred all over the right side of his body. And they're going to say, coming up, that, well, he didn't have PTSD. Right. And they can say that because he's deceased and they can't ask him, how often do you relive that fire? How often are you reminded of that fire every time you go out in the sun? Oh, you can't go out in the sun because if the sunlight really hits and warms up that part of your body, it burns, doesn't it? It's a third degree burn. It hurts. How often did that hurt you? Do you play basketball? I mean, do you run? Do you... Scars up and down the right side of his body. Of course he has PTSD from that. Maybe from the gunshot wound, maybe not, but he certainly has it from that. And what do you think that did to the nerves on the right side of his body? Huh? So this is actually in the opinion, and the reason it's here is they have to figure out how to talk around it, and this is why they sent it back 5 times. They're opinion shopping. VBA failed, and BVA is opinion shopping. Okay, so there was a 2017 and 16 and 18 opinion written by the same VA physician who we don't know anything about. What kind of physician was this person? Was this physician board certified in psychiatry, psychology, what? You don't know. It's not in the opinion. If it was a person board certified as a psychiatrist, that would be a medical doctor. It would be in the opinion. Oh, a board certified psychiatrist said, well, whatever they said, we're not seeing it in this opinion, except this digest. So they sent it back to find one that would finally square. Okay. It was noted that he died approximately 62 years after his burns, and the principal cause of death on the death certificate is noted as congestive heart failure, caused by coronary artery disease. His service-connected conditions are burn scars and anxiety and depression, but they were less likely than not principal or contributing causes of death. There was no mention of burn scars or anxiety and depression on the death certificate. Why would there be? All they put down is what you die from directly. His burn scars were well healed by then. His burn scars were well healed by then. Third-degree burn scars. Oh, so he wasn't leaking bodily fluid anymore. He wasn't oozing fluid. So I guess they're healed. They never heal. There's always pain associated with third-degree burn scars. You can look up third-degree burn scars and see, if they are extensive, what people feel over years and years and years. It's common knowledge all over Google. But he wasn't leaking. He wasn't leaking. And so this guy said, there is no temporal relationship between the death and burn scars 62 years later. And so they went back and they said, we want an addendum. So he added, from this doctor of unknown qualification, he expounded further of an association between psychiatric symptoms and heart diseases, addressing, the widow had presented a 2008 statement from her doctor, or her husband's doctor, and had submitted medical treatises. Oh, wait a minute. And then he noted there was this veteran, after his military career, he was kicked out in 1945. That's his military career. After his military career, went on to have a productive, physically demanding, and long occupation as a lawyer, doctor, dentist, as a great teacher at university. He was groundskeeper at a school. He used to mow the lawn, pick up trash, paint. Groundskeeper, not a plumber, not an electrician. He was a groundskeeper. Then he retired, and having an active retirement and healthy habits. We just saw that he had 15 conditions, including gout, diabetes. I guess this doctor didn't know that. He had healthy habits. VA treatment records later note his anxiety had to do with his son in 2002. Oh, it didn't have to do at all with service connection. So when we read that he went from 80% to 90% and he had TDIU, I guess that just kind of happened. This is an opinion contradicting itself over and over. But you see, they knew what was going to happen. BVA knew this stuff is junk, and it's not going to stand. It is not going to stand. Time for a break. So, his healthy habits. He's 90% in 2006. He's TDIU. He can't work because his admitted service connection disabilities are so bad. Healthy habits. So they said, well, I mean, his anxiety is only related to his son in 2002. So in July 2019, the board requested that a VA examiner review the entire record to include newer articles submitted by appellant relating to anxiety and an increased risk of hypertension, and answer the following. So they said, here are the questions. Now, these are not a DBQ. This is the board saying you will answer these questions. They're not going to send it outside to a medical school. They're not going to send it out to a civilian doctor. They're going to send it to a VA doctor. Why not send it out? Why not send it to a medical school where you'll have a psychiatrist who can talk about these things? A psychologist is not a medical doctor. They are trained in another area of medicine, which is largely mathematical, statistical. It does include biology, physics, chemistry. A psychiatrist is a medical doctor who specializes. She is a medical doctor who specializes in basically the organic operation of the brain and all the things that screw it up and the consequences that come from that, which overlaps with psychology. So, if you were to be thinking about this particular veteran who's 90% disabled because of his wartime mental condition and his burn scars, wouldn't you send it to a psychiatrist? The VA has plenty of psychiatrists. If it doesn't have enough, it can send it out to a local hospital, medical school, etc. And this case is San Diego. There are psychiatrists all over Los Angeles and San Diego. No, it's not going to go out to a psychiatrist. It's going back to the VA. So the board lays out the questions. Now, I'm not going to go through these in great detail. But the board said we want the VA doctor who gets stuck with this to examine the entire extensive medical opinions. Why? Why? Why are you going back to the old opinions which weren't good enough? So this doctor gets work. Whichever doctor got stuck with it, got the work. Short break. Okay, I'm back. I'm not doing well today, so my voice is rattling and I'm resorting to iced up stuff to settle my throat. Oh. So we have a new MD. Why? The veteran had long-standing hypertension documented during his first VA visit in 2000 and is already on medication for hypertension treatment. No, he didn't. He had healthy habits. I just showed you he had healthy habits. What problem? Oh, this gets better. While it is known that stress, anxiety, and depression can cause transient mild elevations in blood pressure, they do not cause persistent and chronic elevations leading to hypertension. Let's read that again. While it is known that stress, anxiety, and depression can cause transient mild elevations in blood pressure, they do not cause persistent and chronic elevations leading to hypertension. Where's the footnote? Where's the article? Where's the research that says that? What if you have chronic stress? He was TDIU in 2006. He was 90% in 2006 because of a chronic mental condition and the burn condition. They don't go away. Maybe the gunshot wound healed up. Maybe he didn't think about that anymore, but that burn, come on, over his right side of his body every time he got dressed. All right. Where is the citation that says, let me add a word, chronic stress, chronic anxiety, and chronic depression, which is why he was TDIU. You don't think that causes continuous hypertension? I just showed you. The veteran had long-standing hypertension. It's called a contradiction. By the way, the Veterans Law Judge knows this. The judge knows this. Everybody knows this. Everybody knows what's going on. They're going to shut this down once and for all. 10 years is an embarrassment. It's remanded 5 times. This is going away. Here we go. The medical community also does not currently embrace the notion of causation of hypertension by mental health disorders. A common resource for the medical community for up-to-date guidelines, understanding, and research is uptodate.com. All right, so Here we have a physician who says, I use this website, uptodate.com. Go find that on your Google. Here's what you'll find. You can subscribe to a company because I looked it up, and it costs a lot of money. And it's a great idea for hospitals or health systems and so forth to subscribe. Why is that? A patient walks in the door and presents, as the medical community says. A patient walks in the door and says, I've got the following symptoms. My skin is coming apart by my legs, my fingertips, and I feel terrible. I feel exhausted. 10 minutes later, another patient comes in and says, oh, I got pains in my left leg, and I had this headache on the right side of my head, and same physician. 10 minutes later, somebody walks in and says, oh, I'm having trouble with my vision. It's coming and going and coming and going, and I have this strange thirst. And yesterday, I didn't know where I was. Now, you can take all of those symptoms, and you can use uptodate.com, and you can plug them in, and it will suggest maybe what you're looking at. Maybe the first person has leprosy. Maybe the second person is having a stroke. Maybe the third person is having a heart attack, and maybe a stroke too. So it tells you things you might want to look at. Then it tells you why you should look at them. There was a wonderful endorsement from someone who, it's on their website, who runs a hospital system in Philadelphia. What a great tool to have. How can a physician keep up on everything for different specialties without being one of those specialists? Well, if a patient presents to a hospital ER or is admitted to intensive care, and it's not overt like a car accident, but maybe there's something about the car accident, maybe there are symptoms that come up, wouldn't it be great to have a database you could plug into and look at things and so forth? That's what uptodate.com is. It's a great resource. I'm not knocking that at all. What did I show you in 28A and 28B? You see, you have to go on Google and you have to look for that. Well, you don't have to do that with uptodate.com. And you don't have to go into research at uptodate.com. So when this physician says the community, he's talking about the VA probably subscribes, pays a lot of money, to uptodate.com. And if you put into that, let's say congestive heart failure, it may tell you what to look for. Is it going to tell you, oh, look for burns? Oh, look for a mental condition that's the person's had for 50 years? Why should it? Notice the doctor makes this grand summary. Oh, this would be wonderful cross-examination. Makes this grand summary to the effect that I checked a website and the medical community. It's, he says, it's not my expertise. I don't know this stuff, but I looked on this website and they don't list it, so therefore it must be dispositive. Whereas the things I showed you yesterday, 28, 28B, seem to indicate that over the course of time, this is the National Institute of Health publishing articles from other journals to the world. NIH publishes to the world. I'm not the only one that finds these. You're not allowed to cross-examine the doctor. You are not allowed to cross-examine their credentials, their findings, or when they say, well, I looked this up and I use this website. He doesn't mention National Institute of Health. He doesn't mention a prominent research organization. He doesn't mention Massachusetts General Hospital, Journal of the American Medical Association, Lancet magazine from Britain. He doesn't show any mega studies, that is, studies of studies. Doesn't do any of that. And he doesn't say he's a psychiatrist. And he doesn't say, you know, there must have been a reason why he was TDIU. He couldn't work. Not because of all this other jazz that they say wasn't relevant. For what he had as service-connected, he couldn't work anymore. It reached all the way back to 1944 and 45. Oh no, he looked it up on a website. It made it seem. Okay. Common resource for the medical community. Okay. The medical community. All right, let's talk about COVID for a second. Every time that you saw the doctors come out with whatever president was doing it, you saw them making recommendations about COVID. And you saw this a lot. Which one of them said? I looked on UpToDate.com and this is what they said. School administrators, hospitals, the military. Did any of them say they took the following steps for COVID because of UpToDate.com? UpToDate.com is an excellent resource for what it is. It's an excellent resource. Hospitals should be subscribing to it. Did you ever hear of it before? And you, over the past 3 or 4 years, have been looking at numbers of institutions who have been talking about COVID and other things, and they talk about the Center for Disease Control. I showed you an article from there. They talk about the National Institute of Health. They talk about big decisions made that affect millions of people based on what they consider to be the real science from the source. So this judge at BVA says, hey, good enough for me. UpToDate.com, like I say, is an excellent resource to help physicians with present diagnosis. And if they want, maybe it's a shortcut to some research, but you have never heard anybody refer to this before. So this becomes a doctor using hearsay. Name the study you saw. Don't tell everybody. You know, a jury would laugh out loud. I've seen this. I've seen juries laugh sometimes. UpToDate.com. Okay, what study did you read on UpToDate.com? What study did you read anywhere? It doesn't say. It just says UpToDate.com. It is essentially a peer-reviewed medical resource. So is Google. Widely accepted in the medical community? I would hope so. I would hope many institutions subscribe to this. I think it would be an excellent idea. When you roll into a garage with your car, there are subscription services that a mechanic can use to read diagnostic codes from your car. They plug in a device, they get a code number, they look it up, and they can look in there and see what the diagnostic code probably indicates. And these are services, computer services, that your mechanic can subscribe to. So can you. You can subscribe to UpToDate.com if you've got enough money. But you understand, this is an excellent research. So is NIH. So is Center for Disease Control. So is the Journal of the American Medical Association. They're not mentioned. So we get this hearsay review of a website, which is probably an excellent website. Okay. Peer-reviewed research does not embrace the notion of causation of hypertension by mental health disorders. What did I show you? 28A, 28B. Peer-reviewed research and resources does not embrace the notion of causation of hypertension by mental health disorders. It is not listed as a significant contributing factor for hypertension. They simply do not show any relationship. Therefore, it is less likely than not aggravated by his service-connected mental disorder. Really? Oh, wouldn't you love to cross-examine this guy? Or gal? So this continues. This is the MD answering some of the questions. Okay? And then he begins to pick up a bone about adjustment disorder with anxiety and depression. You didn't see this earlier. Paralysis of musculocutaneous nerve of the right. Paralysis. He had nerve paralysis. Oh, wait a minute. His burns were completely healed. He had nerve paralysis. I caught that one in time. We're back. I had to do a little bit of stuff. Okay. Here's another part. The veteran's medical records clearly show that his long-standing hypertension in conjunction with his coronary artery disease most likely contributed significantly to his cause of death of congestive heart failure, CHF. The veteran's specific mental health disorder does not appear to be a significant factor or comorbid condition that led to his death. What did I show you about PTSD causing hypertension, leading to heart attacks? What did I show you? So imagine you have this particular physician. He's a witness. He's on the stand. Time for cross-examination. Doctor, here's an article from the CDC, from the NIH, from the Journal of the American Medical Association, from the VA itself. You do this in serial, one after the other after the other. You disagree with this, don't you? You disagree with this, don't you? But you're not in front of a jury. And they've sent this back 5 times. And they are going to get rid of this case. It doesn't matter that everything you're looking at is, I looked it up on an excellent website, and I'm going to summarize it. I'm not going to give you specifics. I'm not going to tell you which articles, how long I researched, what articles I actually read. Well, you see, in real life, what happens is you show the articles and you discuss the interesting articles that you found that you couldn't find anywhere else. There's no discussion of how long this research took. You see, imagine you're in an emergency room. Somebody comes in. You must take decisions. You're a doctor. You go to uptodate.com for help. It's an excellent concept. You go there. You get ideas. They're good ideas based on medical practice that starts to track symptoms back. This veteran was 90%. He was TDIU from his service. He couldn't work. He had burns over the side of his body, and now we find out this late in the opinion that he had nerve paralysis. Of course he had nerve paralysis. He had 3rd-degree burns from burning gasoline, which you can't put out with water. How long do you think he was burning? A minute? 2 minutes? 5 minutes? You know what people do when they go on fire? They run. They move around. How deep were the burns? Of course, he's deceased at this point, so no one can talk to him. And this opinion from this doctor doesn't mention that. He's 90%. He's TDIU for years. He was a groundskeeper, not a plumber, not an electrician. Well, you see, there is no reliable support. No reliable support. I showed you 28A, 28B, I could go on and on. For the theory that the burn scars led to his heart disease, PTSD. And the VA medical opinion evidence is wholly against the theory. Oh, it certainly is. But it's not the VA's medical opinion. It is the VA summarizing, okay, summarizing and making believe it's an opinion. You see, an opinion would be, I have the following credentials. I am an expert in the following area. Here is my opinion. My opinion. Not this opinion. My opinion. Oh, I use the following resources. Here are the following articles I refer to. The board also acknowledges that the appellant's submission of articles in support of her theory that there is a connection between heart disease and his psychiatric disorder. They can't deny that, but finds that they are outweighed by the well-supported opinion of the 2019 VA examiner. Well-supported by what articles? What research? Which? CDC? NIH? Which? Which one of them? You don't have that. And you're not allowed to cross-examine this opinion. Okay. See, they have to keep saying this to defend it. The August 2019 VA opinion is based on a review of the medical record, the conflicting evidence, oh, there was conflicting evidence, and the physician's expertise in, was the physician a psychiatrist? Was the physician a burn specialist? Was the physician trained in psychological disorders resulting from third-degree burns from chemical fires? Where is this expertise? Oh, it's well supported by, you see, you can say that. By what authority? And reference the contrary theories set forth by appellant. Well, of course they were set forth, because they're quite real. But there is no specific renunciation. So supposing the articles that I showed you in 28A and 28B were submitted in this case, how did the physician from the VA dispute those? How did the physician dispute those? Just assume that those are the articles that were submitted. I found them. How did the physician expert dispute those articles? You see, in court, you would show them to the physician expert if they were allowed to testify as an expert. And you would say, how do you disagree with this article? How do you disagree with this article? And so forth. There's no trick in this. It's common sense. So the board finds and I want you to watch this because this is where they were going. The board finds the August 2019 VA physician's conclusions on this matter more probative than the other evidence of record. There was other evidence of record. So they said, we find it more probative. The board may adopt a particular independent medical expert's opinion. Independent? This is a VA doctor who was assigned to this. Nothing says that this doctor volunteered. Nothing says this doctor volunteered. He's on the VA payroll. He doesn't name a single article. We don't know if the person is a psychiatrist. We know that the victim of TDIU and 90% goes all the way back to World War II. We know he's paralyzed, paralysis of nerves. We know he's got extensive right side injuries, burns. We know he was a groundskeeper, not an electrician. And you've seen the articles that I showed you. If I took a day to go through it, I could find probably a lot more. Remember all those citations of different articles? I showed you how real research works. It's very important when you look at these articles that you understand the scholarship involved. I showed, what was it, 4 or 5 major articles. And then I showed a common verbiage from Yale University, medical. I showed you the footnotes, and I showed you the authorities that were relied upon. I could go through every one of those authorities. There were over 150. I could go through every one of them. I went through some of them, but I could go through every one of them. Would I find something that says, oh, well, if you have PTSD and stress every day and cardiovascular death and so forth, obviously they are unrelated and cannot be related. Do you think that any of them would say that? All right, so there you have it. And this is important to note. Lastly, we note that the veteran was not in receipt of or entitled to receive a 100% evaluation for a period of 10 or more years prior to death. That's important because if he was, it's all over. What did you just look at? Ta-da! I showed you this in the beginning. Lesson 1. This is the ambush. You walked into it. Okay? And then we have physician's certification and signature. Okay. What did this experiment tell you? 5 times. You don't get 5 times. It wasn't good enough. They went opinion shopping. They got an opinion and they said, without any cross-examination, right? Good enough. It's good enough. And we're not going to allow cross-examination. You can't cross-examine this guy because we said so. Case closed. Move on. Take it up somewhere else. 10 years, a case is kicking around at the BVA. You don't think they have pressure? Now, I'm going to tell you something really wild. If this case went up to the Court of Appeals of Veterans Claims, they would uphold this decision. You're not allowed cross-examination. You're not allowed discovery. You can get a copy of the record, so to speak, but the record isn't the notes and so forth. You won't be allowed to cross-examine or take depositions from this doctor or any doctors. You need a lawyer. You need a lawyer who anticipates real litigation and who, in anticipating real litigation, understands what this setup is going to be. And this was set up. But understand something. The law allows this setup. They can go back 10 times. You don't get to cross-examination. You don't find out what articles this particular expert physician looked at. You don't find anything. This is the way the system is set up. So you have the burden of proof as a veteran. Your widow has the burden of proof. You can be 90% TDIU, nerve paralysis, burned extensively on the right side of your body. Too bad. It can't cause a heart attack. It can't. It can't. No matter what the CDC, NIH, Yale, anybody else says, Journal of the American Medical Association, why would you read that junk? That's not persuasive. Why do you care what the VA's own publication says? Well, it didn't say technically PTSD, so therefore, even though PTSD can do it, and the diagnosis, the label didn't exist back in 1945. What did you just see in this opinion? You saw the law. Therefore, you need an attorney who anticipates the stunts that the law will throw at veterans. Congress knows this. An adequate medical exam can be nothing like you think it should be. Okay, so the big shots. You're the head of Board of Veterans Appeals. And you fall down the stairs and you have a cranial injury and you have a stroke. Off to the operating room. It's an emergency. And you're going to be operated on by an internist who looked at surgery on UpToDate.com, which I'm sure has extensive articles about it with pictures and all that. Do you think that would happen? Of course not. You would have a neurosurgeon, brain surgeon, doing the operation. And afterwards, if there was psychological damage, you'd have a psychiatrist. See? What you saw here is what the law allows the VA to do to veterans. They can go back 10 times till they finally get something that they are stuck with. And once this opinion came back, here's the kicker. The veterans law judge, with this opinion, knowing you can't cross-examine, knowing full well that there's no authority, the article isn't presented, etc., and knowing what the literature is on the outside in the real world from CDC and so forth, knowing all that, get ready for this. According to the Court of Appeals of Veterans Claims, that was an adequate medical opinion. So even if a veterans law judge was as observant and cynical as I am with my litigation experience, the veterans law judge was under obligation to do exactly what you saw. Does that take your breath away? Because the CAVC, the Court of Appeals of Veterans Claims, has said on numerous occasions, junk work is adequate. It is an adequate medical exam. The exam could have been by a nurse practitioner. This is not to denigrate nurse practitioners. Could have been by a registered nurse, which is not to denigrate registered nurses. I'm talking about the law. When this opinion came back, if I had been the veterans law judge, knowing what I know and what I have just talked to you about, if I followed precedent set by this strange court, this Court of Appeals of Veterans Claims, I would have been bound to do the same thing. That's how bad the system is. So, what do you do? Please talk to a lawyer. The lawyer will consider what will happen if I were to litigate this thing. How would I prove, disprove? What measure of proof do I have, etc., etc. And anticipating litigation would go at these people and would have challenged this. There is a difference between court litigation and this. This is a monstrosity because it's ex parte, behind your back. You don't get to interrogate. You don't get affidavits. You don't get anything. So, this is a horror story. Purple Heart, gunshot wound, third-degree burns, gasoline fire. Every day of his life, he probably relived that. You know it, and I know it, and everybody knows it. And the case was brought by a widow, and she was kicked back for 10 years. And they can do this to your widow, and they can do this to your children, anybody that could have DIC. Because the law says they should do it. Go back 5 times. All right. The next one is going to be, well, I'm going to show you the next one. 29 will be, I think, Freedom of Information Act, some of the latest stuff. Okay, that's it for today.